It wasn't the usual his and her split up of assets in a divorce settlement. No, all these belonged to him to be used on her. 65 pounds of explosives, a pair of handcuffs, a gun and a rope to be turned into a noose, and what had been their home now wired with surveillance equipment so nobody could get in and no one could get out. Just 3 weeks ago, Nancy Tyler, with her children by her side, walked into court for what she hopes will be the final chapter in a disturbing and violent saga.
Over the years leading up to the kidnapping, Mr. Shankman stalked me.
As she reads from her victim's impact statement in this Connecticut courtroom, the man who has tormented her looks on, her ex-husband of 12 years, Richard Shankman.
Mr. Shankman named his battle the War of the Tylers, but he was the only one at war. The rest of us were just trying to survive.
Shankman's War of the Tylers was a reference to the War of the Roses.
I am the one who found this house. I bought everything in it with my money. It's a lot easier to spend it than it is to make it, honey bun.
A popular film in which a divorcing couple, played by Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, both end up dead. Nancy Tyler's recollections of her abusive marriage to Shankman are a far cry from the life she imagined for herself in 1992, when she was set up on a blind date with a charismatic TV producer.
You know, I wasn't really looking for someone. I had my 2 children, and my father was ill at the time, so things were a little bit upside down, and he came along and we got along well.
And was it the first time that you kind of leaned on somebody else?
First time in a while, and I felt like I could, because he seemed to be in control and seemed to have it all together.
Shankman seemed like the answer to Nancy's prayers. She had suffered a heart attack just before they met, and now says that may have made her more vulnerable to Shankman's charms and blind to what he was truly capable of.
We're all going down. I'm going to destroy your life.
They were married after 1.5 years of dating, his 3rd trip to the altar and her 2nd. Nancy says things were fine in the very beginning of their marriage. They lived in a prosperous suburb of Hartford, Connecticut, and bought a Victorian beach house on the shore. Shankman owned a TV studio and produced The Gayle King Show. He adopted Nancy's children, Victoria and Peter. But it wasn't long before Nancy began to detect a darker side of her husband's personality. When did you notice the change?
Things were okay for the first couple of years. As the relationship went on, he became much more controlling. When he was angry, everybody knew it, and he screamed, he yelled, sometimes threw things. He would slam his fist against the wall, foul mouth, and just very obviously out of control.
So he would be verbally abusive,
yes,
mentally
yes,
abusive, physically?
Not really, no. It was not certainly bruising and broken bones, things like that.
Is that sometimes harder to explain to people if you don't have the black eye or you don't have the broken bones or something
I think it's harder to explain, and it's also a reason why people don't seek help.
Nancy's sister Marilyn says even her closest family members had no idea what Shankman was doing to her.
He kept her isolated. He evidently told her that her family didn't care about her, which we had no idea about.
Nancy's son, Peter.
She made a very clear effort to shield us from it and to keep us out of the mix.
Nancy feared that should she file for divorce, that Shankman would fight her for custody of her children, so they tried to make the best of it.
Any misstep, even if we didn't know that it was a misstep, could set off the minefield.
But it would be a fight between Shankman and Nancy's 16-year-old son over the use of his car that would ultimately finish off their crumbling marriage.
My ex-husband just snapped.
He ran out into the garage and ripped the license plate off of the car so that I couldn't drive it, and start screaming, blood-curdling, shrieking.
Hearing the way he was talking to my son, I knew that this was it. It could not go on any longer.
Nancy assumed that filing for divorce would end her troubles, but as it turned out, it was just the beginning.
I probably have 200 or 300 emails that are very abusive, and it got uglier and uglier.
In one disturbing email, Shankman wrote, "This divorce is going places you've never seen. I've got nothing to lose that I care about, so I will risk it all." He also left her vicious and taunting voicemails.
Howard, you can only get your divorce one way, and that's it. We're all going down. I'm gonna destroy your life.
Nancy says Shankman began stalking her, sitting outside her gym, taking pictures of her, and that wasn't all he took.
There were times when I would go to the gym and he would take my car.
How'd he get your car?
Because he had keys to the car, because they were cars we had had as a married couple.
Nancy had been granted an order of protection and used it to have Shankman arrested, but the harassment escalated.
Our divorce became the war of the Tylers. One of the very first things he did was send me an email to say, "You need to get new shoes." The husband in that movie cuts off the heels on all of the shoes belonging to his wife. It was always, this is going to end up the way the movie ended.
But unlike the War of the Roses, Nancy was not forced to share a roof with her soon-to-be ex-husband. She was living at their beach house and had just arrived at work one morning when she received a chilling phone call.
A friend of mine called me and said, "You know, you better turn on the news because there's a house on fire in Niantic and I think it might be yours." So I drove down here and the beach house was just engulfed in flames from top to bottom, and it was completely burned to the ground with everything in it.
Nancy lost everything, and Shankman was arrested for arson. You see your home and everything you own burned, and most people think that's bad, and that's as bad as it's going to get in a divorce.
I thought he would do something, but I never thought it would go the way it went.
After 3 painful years, Nancy's divorce from Richard Shankman was nearly over. On July 7, 2009, they were due in court for what Nancy hoped would be the last time. Unable to sleep, she left for work at dawn. But when she arrived at her office, she was startled to see Shankman's car parked outside.
I telephoned a friend on my cell phone and said, "You know, something's kind of funny here."
And she told me that she saw Richard's van parked on the street, but she didn't see any sign of Richard.
It was dark, there was nobody there, it was still very early in the morning. The last person I expected to see was him.
And then in the course of the conversation, all of a sudden, she screamed, "Richard, get away from me."
And he came at me and showed me a gun. I had the phone in my hand and I said to my friend,
"Suzanne, call the police."
"He's here. He's got a gun."
And then the phone went dead.
And we struggled for the phone and he got it away from me and said, "Get in the car."
Suzanne dialed 911 to report Nancy's abduction.
She was on the street. He came up to her. I could hear his voice in the background, and she said, "Suzanne, call the police."
Your heart must have been racing.
I was frightened for her, very frightened. I felt that Richard was capable of absolutely anything. You know.
But what Richard Shankman was really capable of would shock everyone.
I'm leaving this property in a body bag.
12 hours of terror.
You got till 9. Don't try to talk to me.
I know.
Please.
Okay, I know, Nancy. I know.
Caught on tape.